what I really want to talk about is the 21st century research enterprise and research skills. And I think ideas which go beyond the current obsession with digital. Digital is obviously changing the nature not just of science and technology production, but also the nature of the world that we researchers and scientists occupy, the types of research we do. But digital is by far not the only area of science and technology that is changing our universe. The electron microscope is something that I would suggest we all need to learn to know perhaps almost as much about as we do about mobile phones and laptops and software. So while we have become very conversant with digital technologies, we use them in everyday life, we all use them, it doesn't matter what kind of science and technology you do, it doesn't matter whether you're a researcher or not. We are increasingly familiar with digital technologies. In fact, many people, many scientists, many professionals are becoming digital bilinguals. But are we also physics bilinguals? Some argue that physics really created the 20th century, and some may go further to argue that physics is creating the 21st century. So behind a lot of the more public science are still the foundational disciplines. And the nanosciences are perhaps still today in South Africa and many African countries a bit of a Cinderella science when it should not be. And so I chose, instead of putting anything digital on my cover slide at all, I chose to rather focus on physics and nanosciences and technologies. So I was asked to talk about, or to attempt to converse about the question, is the world of the 4IR changing the research enterprise and the skills required for research? I would suggest yes and no. Yes, digital technologies and their integration with other technologies is changing the nature of research. There are all kinds of things that we can now do which were very complex and difficult or even impossible to do before. But is it the 4IR or what is referred to, I'm not sure why, as the 4IR, changing our world? No. Our world is constantly changing because of a very, very wide array, not only of science and technologies, but demands and ideas. And so we have, over the years from the mid-1990s, spoken about other ways of interpreting the forces driving change in the science and technology environment. We've spoken about the knowledge economy. We've spoken about the innovation economy. The white paper, the 10-year innovation plan sets out 5 grand challenges: biotech and pharmaceuticals, space, energy security, climate change. And while these have become even greater influences in the field of global science and technology, there are new frontiers. So I'd like to talk about some of those new frontiers, but just a quick show of hands. How many software programmers in the room? Just very quick. Okay. How many physicists? Hands up. Not even one? Chemists? Couple? Dietitians? No one. Musicians? Lovely. I'm so happy. Because musicians, of course, are working in the field of science and technology? Health tech producers, anybody? Health tech, nanoscientists. We just had a nanoscience summer school, not back yet. Digital bilinguals, who regards themselves as a digital bilingual? Jansi, wonderful. Next year I'm coming back, I want to see everybody putting their hands up. Neuropsychiatrists, research managers. Should be a lot of research managers. Okay. If you look at the latest Time magazine, they have the 100 best inventions of 2019. They're not all about digital. They're about a wide range of topics. Skincare is big. Food is very big. Because we're apparently not very knowledgeable about food, health, and lifestyles. Forms of transport, new forms of transport, energy, and so on. So what are the ideas, the background ideas driving 21st century science, and where do they come from? Who has been revolutionizing scientific thought? I don't think it's Klaus Schwab. I think that scientific thought has been continuously revolutionized, and I'm just going to go back to the 1400s, but that's certainly not the earliest set of influences on scientific thought today. Biomimicry in the 1400s, Leonardo da Vinci, you know, with birds and imitating birds, to produce new technologies 6 centuries ago. And he was certainly not the first scientist to engage in biomimicry. Biomimicry is one of the key sets of ideas underlying science and technology today. It does not come from the 4IR. Einstein with photonics and the photoelectric effect, moving on to Schrodinger with quantum physics, and much more recently, Michio Kaku. I'm not sure if anybody has read Michio Kaku. Anyone? Lovely. Well, let's talk later. Theoretical physics, the brain as the next frontier of science and technology. So he talks about the fact that, you know, there's been all this huge investment in mapping the human genome project, and the next big mapping project is the human brain project. And where's that going to take us in terms of science, technology, and society? The second nanotechnologies revolution, where we are now bringing in these underlying ideas of biomimicry and quantum physics in working at the atomic and the molecular level. And so much of the future of the health sciences, the physical sciences, the natural sciences, aerospace, space, climate change, energy, all lies not alone in the digital revolution, but in the nano revolution, or actually in the convergence of digital and nano. I've just mentioned a couple of the key, some of the top researchers today, leading thinkers. Obviously, the field of science and technology is just huge. There's so many people. I'm not suggesting that, you know, we only need to read these people, but I would suggest that we do need to read what they're saying. Omowunmi Sadik, originally from Nigeria, sadly based in the US. And in software today, we're not only talking electronics and mobile communications, but we're now talking tech hubs and smart cities. And while we all know the name of Bill Gates, we don't necessarily know the names of some of the top coders in the world who live in India, Sumit Varma and Rajati. So what's the point here? The point is that exploring the foundations of 21st century research is really about knowing broad science, not only knowing our own niche. So we have to know our own niche, our own field very, very well. And that's really hard. Just knowing one's own field is really hard because of how broad each niche field has become. But we also really need to know about other fields of science other than our own. And I sort of, in thinking about this, but thinking about other things as well, I sort of thought, well, which would I nominate? Which other field of science would I nominate as a top field? And for me, that's physics. We all need to know something about physics. We all need to understand how a particular branch of physics interrelates to our particular field and niche area. So this is just a few 9 quick, very short conversations. So the next set of conversations is going to go a little bit more quickly. I spoke about music, and I don't know who watched the 6th African Music Awards in Lagos. A fabulous program, but what we're really looking at there is digital quality sound engineering. Without digital quality sound engineering, those African Music Awards really don't play well to an audience. We're talking about artificial intelligence-enabled literature reviews. We all know how time-consuming literature reviews can be, and particularly when you're engaged in doctoral or postdoctoral studies, perhaps we're spending an inordinate amount of time on doing the sort of, all the technical getting together, and spending less time on actually thinking about what this all means and how to apply it. So having artificial intelligence to enable literature reviews, and this is not something of the future, it's already being done. It's just a question of how. And obviously we don't want to compromise the integrity of theorization by simply saying, oh no, AI will do it. We're not suggesting that at all. It's just enabling mechanisms. Talking about nano, I think we're all familiar with drones, even if we don't have one. But we're now talking about UAVs in autonomous and semi-autonomous flight. We're talking about nano-tagging and nano-robotics. And all of that is a convergence of digital and nanosciences. Think about dentistry. Think what dentistry is today. Why is dentistry still painful? Does it need to be? If we are becoming really powerful in nanoscience knowledge, in building, at the cellular, atomic, and molecular level. Think cancer, okay? Real big challenges for the future, challenges which are global challenges, but they are very real to us as South Africans and as Africans. We see that competitive countries like Russia and China, Russia has a huge venture capital firm called Nano, and in China, we have a nanopolis. In other words, a city engaged in nanoscience, or built for the purpose of engaging in nanoscience. In South Africa, we have the National Center for Nanostructured Materials and the DST Mintech Nanotech Innovation Center, but despite the many institutions engaged in nanoscience, and we have just under 1,000 masters and PhDs graduates, and more people engaged, young people engaged in nanoscience studies. We have 5,000 publications, but we only have 44 patents. That's not even scratching the surface. So there's a huge future balancing that needs to take place where we need to forge ahead. It's not bad having 5,000 publications, but that's just the foundation. What we really need is lots and lots of patents that are really, really valuable for Africa and the developing world. And I'm just quoting from Prof. Lavak at the recent UWC, well, she's from UWC, but at the recent Nanoscience Summer School, who said, you have the science, and now the question is, what do you do with it? How do we apply this research in innovative ways and bring new tech into common use? And those are big questions for research managers, okay? Because scientists tend to be very occupied, get up every morning and think about the thing that you've been thinking about for the last, 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. And sometimes you need that kind of intersection with research managers to bring other discussions and conversations into the frame. I spoke about digital bilinguals, meaning that each person, not just researcher, but each person is digitally literate as much as they are language literate. So the third conversation, quick conversation, I've called it from linearity to complexity to research and innovation entanglement. And what we're learning is that we need to move away from linearity. The discoveries, the future, the innovation, the invention does not particularly lie in linearity, but in interdisciplinarity. So one question might be, how do we move scientists with a particular set of skills from one sector to another? If we have trained physicists, can we move them into digital health? Because we're not doing very well on digital health. In fact, we're doing very poorly. If we have young people trained in software development, can we move them into nanoscience? Can we move them into biotech? Can we move them into agri-tech? Can they advance precision agriculture, which we'll look at in a moment? We're seeing all kinds of new issues that don't only relate to the physical sciences, but to the human sciences. Eco-anxiety, because of deforestation, fires, climate change, health risks, cybersecurity risks, etc. We have a massive responsibility for recycling of plastics, or creating recyclable plastics, or packaging in the first place. Let me not say plastics. But we have an ocean of plastic somewhere in the north of the world. And it doesn't matter that we can't see it, smell it, feel it, or touch it. It's affecting us negatively. We have very big issues when it comes to intellectual property rights. We just have recently the adoption of the Copyright Act. But the Copyright Act really only deals with issues in publications. It doesn't really yet foster, or it hasn't had the opportunity yet to foster the development of knowledge, to make available in an open access world all the knowledge, or as much of the knowledge as possible that we need to render more and more patents. Patents don't just come out of, some clever idea or some tinkering. They come out of lots and lots and lots of prior knowledge. And if we have limited access to that prior knowledge, or it's hidden behind copyright walls, that's a serious problem and relates to the complexity for South African scientists of actually producing science, patents, licenses, and so on. And as this world becomes immensely more complex, what we often find doesn't really matter how clever you are, how much you know, but as the world, as ideas become more complex, and as research management faces more and more adversity, we tend to shy away from rather than run towards the complexity, when that's exactly what we should be doing. We should be inviting and encouraging complexity. And I've called that research and innovation entanglement, becoming entangled in the complex reality of science production. There is no simple science production. And of course, there's the economics of research and innovation, where research is always underfunded. It's a given. It's never going to be funded to the level that we're looking for. So we have to operate in a reality of science underfunding. So just very quickly, I don't want to belabor the point about the 4IR as opposed to 21st century science, but there are many reasons why we should not really be calling it the 4IR. Firstly, it's not industrial. It's post-industrial. It happens in so many places. It could happen right here in the corridors if we just had a 3D printer in one of the booths outside. The people manning that booth would be producing science and technology. So it's not industrial because there's so many smaller units of production, but there are also so many larger units of production. There's environmental scale problems like the plastic sea. And we have to we have to offer environmental scale solutions, not industrial scale solutions. And then just, you know, tongue in cheek, we need to be able to count beyond 4 and not exclude other fields of science and competitive economic activity. Despite the fact that science and technology will be underfunded, we still need significantly more funding. The 10-year innovation plan spoke about 2% of GDP. Well, GDP is now something around, I forget, X trillion, 1.46 trillion or something like that, rands. So 2% would be 97.4 billion. The CESTI report for 2017 ending March 2018 says that we spent 38.7. So we're really, really far off when it comes to the kind of expenditure on R&D, on science and innovation that we really need. So there should be applications in every field of endeavor, in precision agriculture. There are lots of questions. Who is building the tech? I didn't ask if there are agricultural technologists in the room. Anybody? But who's building the tech? Okay, great. Is South Africa engaged in building agricultural technologies for precision agriculture? Who is buying, who is owning the tech? Who is using, who's working with the tech? Are agricultural workers in South Africa's 21st century using precision agriculture technologies? Swathes and swathes of the workforce. What's the tech value chain and where do agricultural workers and managers fit in? In digital manufacturing, what are we doing with 3D visualization? Are we using digital twin services in problem solving, where you model a problem in the digital environment, solve it in the digital environment, which makes it much easier and less wasteful in terms of time and money to solve it in the real world? What are we doing in healthcare? I saw that one of the stalls outside is for the Pelebox smart locker, Technovera. And this Pelebox smart locker is fantastic because you don't have to go to a clinic to stand in a queue to wait for you know, your monthly medication. You can find a Pelebox, hopefully at more and more outlets, shopping centers, malls, even clinics, and simply collect your medication by keying in a PIN code to this smart locker. And what about operating theater black boxes, virtual surgery, and personalized robots that also have some forms of artificial sensory perception? Then there's fintech innovation, not only blockchain and cryptocurrencies, but insurtech. So the lovely example of insurtech is that there's a huge market for insurance, but insurance is not really affordable if you have to pay on a monthly basis. But if you take out insurance for the 1 week or the 2 weeks that you go on holiday at the end of the year, house insurance, car insurance if you have a car, it becomes affordable. So you can have these new insurtech products which are supported by Internet of Things and remote sensors, which enable the insurers to gather lots of data and to offer significantly cheaper prices to the market, but still insure you for good value for those short periods of time. And that takes us into smart cities. And smart cities are definitely not only about digital and all kinds of measurements and underlying infrastructures and so on. They are also very much about how the range of sciences, brain science, nanoscience, digital science, and other sciences, environmental sciences, all come together. It's the integrator that really makes for powerful futures. sticking with physics and nanoscience, and I'm just choosing kind of one key issue here from each of these mini conversations. We're at 7, we're going for 9. But one of the big challenges on the African continent in this century is that we are reliant on these 3 TG minerals, tantalum, tin, gold, and tungsten, for making lots of digital equipment. And what that means is that the firms who are extracting these 3 TG minerals in places like DRC Congo and a few other countries, because many of those minerals are abundant only in a few countries in the world, and those countries happen to be on the African continent. And many of those companies are extracting minerals under condition of violent conflict. So there are wars. It's not just blood diamonds. These minerals that is in every cell phone, every laptop, on every table in this room is being mined at the cost of human life. But we're not really very powerful in the nanosciences yet in terms of more advanced materials. But some of these elements could potentially be built through nanoscience and technology rather than through conflict-based extraction. And then conversation 8, producing the 21st century generation of scientists. What we really need to see a lot of is education science. Our education systems are failing, but they are not just failing because of weak teaching. They are failing even more because the 21st century knowledge content is not in the classroom. It's not there. Are research skills taught from a young age? No. Is nanoscience mentioned in a school textbook? Even digital, which has been around for 30 or more years, electronics, the basics of it. We don't find this as really the content of what is being taught in schools. So we really need education science. We need teachers who can teach with dynamic software applications. We don't have to have the static chalk and talk anymore. But we have been asking teachers to teach with, for example, free dynamic software GeoGebra. But we haven't taught them to teach with dynamic software. We need to understand pseudoscience, because pseudoscience has become a huge challenge across the globe. And ask ourselves, are we too practitioners of pseudoscience? These are questions for scientists and for research managers. And then I thought to just talk about, some other issues about what kind of lifestyles we lead. We still lead very industrialized lifestyles. We work 9 to 5 or 9 to 9 or 9 to 12 midnight, or this is an industrial lifestyle. It is not necessarily a highly productive lifestyle. I am not a vegan, but I've done quite a bit of reading about veganism, and it appears that vegan-enabled lifestyles can be very powerful. And if you think about it, I don't know what percentage of the Indian population in India, but a large percentage of the Indian population in India is vegan. And they are scientists and researchers. And they're very powerful scientists and researchers. So these are all new questions to come to grips with in thinking about science lifestyles of the future. And finally, the last little conversation, who is a scientist? We still talk in these quite individualistic terms, a scientist. But really we know that science is about collaboration, really good science. Not just big science, but good science. is very much about teams, collaborative, co-working, crowd science, citizen science, etc. These are new boundaries to cross. There's formality, there's informality. There's also key questions about regulation. That's the little cycle on the, well, for you, the left-hand side of the screen. Key questions about the regulation of AI-enabled applications. And a question which the next speaker and the panel is going to talk about, so I'm really just going to say something very quickly about Orta's curve. And that is that really simple tasks and really creative tasks cannot be taken over by simple automation or even by complex automation. So I think the question, you know, are we going to be replaced is no. And that's where I'm going to end by saying, is it about jobs and employment, or is it about skills, ideas, careers, apps, patents, and research trajectories? Thank you very much.